headlines on Reporting Scotland this Tuesday lunchtime. Doctors warn staff shortages and increased demand are pushing GP services to the brink of collapse. And the Prime Minister confirms 5 more Type 26 frigates will be built on the Clyde. Hello there, good afternoon. GP services in Scotland are reaching a tipping point because of staffing shortages, and it's putting patients at risk. That's the warning from doctors. It comes as a survey of GPs by the British Medical Association Scotland shows over 80% of respondents said demand was exceeding capacity. The Scottish Government says it's investing and recruiting to improve matters. Our health correspondent Lisa Summers has more.
This community group is all about well-being, but when the conversation turns to seeing a GP, the vibe drops.
An absolute nightmare trying to get an appointment. I'll be quite honest, I gave up calling because every time I call, I'm not getting any answers.
The irony in the same building is the local GP surgery. But like every other day, the 3 call handlers that work here break bad news.
Unfortunately, we've reached capacity this morning, but is there anything I can help you with?
Why can't they see a GP?
Well, one very good reason you can't see a GP is because there aren't enough GPs. We can absolutely understand patient frustration and fear that they and their loved ones are maybe not getting access to the care that they deserve. And we agree, we think that the provision is not enough. We cannot work any harder. We are doing everything that we can.
There has been a small rise in overall GP numbers, and the government says it's spending £170 million a year on recruiting more, as well as support staff to help. But demand has also been growing for many years, and the BMA says over 1/3 of practices have vacancies, up on last year.
I worry that we're reaching a tipping point for some practices. They lose 1, maybe 2 doctors out of 3, and the remaining doctors cannot continue. So they return the contract, the practice, as may cease to exist, and that is a real concern in some parts of Scotland.
90% of our contact with the health service comes through the community, so things like GP practices. But doctors say we're going to have to get used to changes in the way that we get appointments or access healthcare because they simply cannot meet demand. But the fear is, if we can't sort out the strain in this part of the system, then it's only going to add to pressure in our hospitals and longer waits at A&E.
Lisa Summers, Reporting Scotland, Edinburgh.
There's been a slight improvement in A&E waiting times, but the Health Secretary, Humza Yousaf, is warning there will be fluctuations throughout what he says will be a challenging winter. The last week of October saw the worst waiting times on record, with just over 63% of patients seen within the target time of 4 hours. That's now improved to 65.1% in the latest weekly figures. Meanwhile, the country's largest health union says its members will have no choice but to strike unless they receive an improved pay deal. Members of Unison have rejected the Scottish Government's offer to increase pay by around £2,200. The Health Secretary has already warned there's no more money. Now, elsewhere, the Prime Minister has confirmed the remaining 5 warships for the Royal Navy's Type 26 frigate programme are to be built in Glasgow. A £4.2 billion contract has been awarded to BAE Systems on the Clyde to build the frigates, in addition to the 3 already under construction. Well, our political correspondent David Porter joins us now. And David, what can you tell us about this?
Well, here at the Ministry of Defence, the announcement by the Prime Minister that these extra Type 26 frigates are going to be built will not come as a surprise, but it will be welcomed nevertheless. To tell the truth, we've known since the Defence Review of 2015 that the figure they were going with was going to be 8 Type 26 frigates. Originally it was going to be more, then it was scaled back, and there were fears that it might be scaled back a little bit more. So it will be welcomed, the confirmation that in total there will be 8 Type 26 frigates being built. According to the UK government, it will guarantee work at the Govan and Scotstoun yards till the 2030s, and according to ministers here, it should safeguard 1,700 jobs at the yard and probably about 2,300 jobs in the supply industry. As you would expect with such an announcement, it has been welcomed across the political spectrum. But MPs are also wanting to look at the long-term future of military shipbuilding in Scotland. The Scottish Affairs Committee has started an inquiry. What they want to do is make sure that with such long lead times in orders that the yards in Scotland are well placed for any future orders.
David Porter, thank you. Average wages have fallen further behind the cost of living. The latest official monthly figures also show the number of Scots seeking work between July and September reached 98,000. That's up slightly from a near historic low, while the jobless total also rose across the UK as a whole. Well, our business correspondent David Henderson joins us now to talk us through this. And David, low wage growth, will that make life more difficult for workers?
Well, it certainly could, Sarah. Once again, we're reminded that the cost of living is soaring and wages are not keeping pace with it. Today's official figures show that average wages rose by 6% in the year to September. On the face of it, that sounds okay until you see the current rate of inflation, which is that bit higher. And the upshot is that earnings continue to fall in real terms. They were down by 2.6% over the year. So a typical worker is earning less than they did last year in real terms. And a typical household budget is now under even greater pressure. So it makes life that bit more challenging for most workers and their families, especially when you add falling wages to a rise in food prices, energy bills and mortgage rates, which many of us now face.
And David, how significant is this slight rise in unemployment?
Well, it's a slight increase in the number of Scots out of work and looking for a job. The total through the autumn was 98,000 people, and the unemployment rate went up to 3.5% in Scotland. That's still very slightly below the UK as a whole, slightly better, and it's almost as low as it's been for 50 years. But this rise could be significant because the Bank of England has warned that the UK economy is heading for a downturn. It's predicting a recession lasting 2 years or so with output shrinking, and it's warned unemployment could double from where we are as a result. So difficult conditions are impacting on employers who may be less likely to take on staff, more likely to lay off workers, causing that jobless total to rise. It's still early days, but the jobs market may be showing signs of strain. Sarah.
David Henderson, thank you very much for that analysis. And now it's time to look at your weather forecast, and Kirstine is here. Good afternoon, Kirstine.
Good afternoon, Sarah. Thank you very much indeed. Good afternoon to you too. Well, it's been a cloudy and wet morning of weather across much of the country, and there is further rain in the forecast. Indeed, a Met Office yellow warning remains in place across parts of Perthshire, Angus and Aberdeenshire until 9 o'clock this evening, catering for the risk of localised flooding, but difficult travelling conditions across much of the country this afternoon as this band of rain continues to slowly push its way northeastwards on blustery southeasterly winds. Gale force gusts in Shetland, something a little drier and brighter feeding into the west coast, with highs of around 13 Celsius. This evening, and the rain continues to push northeastwards, severe gales will affect Shetland tonight. Elsewhere, it turns drier and clearer during the early hours, making for quite a chilly night with lows of around 2 or 3 Celsius. To tomorrow, and the rain will linger across Shetland, accompanied by storm force gusts of wind which could well prove disruptive to ferry services. Elsewhere, a much drier and brighter prospect. Scattered heavy showers will affect western coasts, and it'll be a chillier day with highs of 10 Celsius. Thursday, our weather will very much be driven by low pressure overhead. Cloudy for the most part, with outbreaks of persistent and at times heavy rain, especially so across eastern areas, accompanied by strong to gale force southeasterly winds, highs of 12 Celsius. That's the forecast. Sarah.
Kirstine, thank you very much for that. Thank you. And that's all from us for the moment. We'll be back with all of your news, sport and weather during Reporting Scotland at 6:30 tonight. From everyone on the Lunchtime team, thank you very much for joining us. Have a lovely afternoon. Bye-bye.